Hi everybody, hopefully you can hear me. If we have live now, then please could somebody just put in the chat there, because we have had times before where I've been talking for about 2 minutes and we haven't actually been live. So yeah, if you can hear me, please do let me know and we'll kick off. Hopefully. Yes, they can hear us. Awesome. Thank you very much. So welcome to our webinar on predictions for 2023 and what candidates really want. And yes, thank you. Hello, everybody. This is amazingly one of our most popular webinars, which we definitely weren't expecting for December, but I think it's testament to the brilliant panel that we've assembled and also the very exciting topic that we're talking about. I'm Molly. I am the CEO and one of the co-founders of Flexa Careers. And Flexa is the global directory of verified flexible companies. And a lot of the data that I will be talking about in particular today has come from our user base of about 700,000 people, all of whom are searching for brilliantly flexible companies. So we can see all of the trends that have emerged over the last 24 months in terms of what people are looking for, what they don't like, what they do like. And we're also able to look at that in respect to the companies that come through and verify themselves as well. So without further ado, I will start to introduce our fantastic panel. So we've got Louis from Flipdish. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Cheers, Molly. Yeah, so I've worked at Flipdish for about 18 months now, basically responsible for the global talent acquisition strategy and employer brand. Flipdish, to keep it really simple in one word, basically is like a full stack tech and marketing solution for the global restaurant trade.
Awesome. Lovely introduction there. Chris, I'll come to you next. Words from Mars.
Hello. Thank you for having me. So I'm Chris. I look after employer reputation and recruitment marketing for Mars in the UK, Ireland and Netherlands. So I think most of you hopefully will know Mars, but we are a global kind of fast-moving consumer goods industry. So we are responsible for brands like Pedigree, Whiskers, IAMS, M&M's, Mars, Snickers, Orbit, and Domino as well. I could probably go on for quite a while, but I won't bore everyone there.
Awesome, thank you very much. And Chris is also battling through a bad cold, so we really appreciate him being here when he's really not feeling
the mega cold.
Yeah, sorry, I shouldn't just call it a bad cold, it's the mega cold. And finally, we've got Gillian from Workvivo.
Hi everybody. I'm Gillian French. I am the expert in residence for employee experience with Workvivo. It's a very fancy title, but what it means is that I look after all things employee experience within Workvivo, but I also do work externally, research, looking into employee experience through podcasts, articles, and research papers. So that's what I do in Workvivo. And Workvivo is an employee engagement and communication platform. So
awesome. So as you can tell, we've got a brilliant kind of spread of different perspectives and different expertise to be able to talk you through what we think will happen in 2023. Just a brief piece of housekeeping, I hate that phrase, but if you have a question that you would like us to answer, then in the top next to the chat function, it says chat, questions, polls. So please pop in questions either into the chat or into the question bit, and we will come to that in kind of the second half of the session. And if you would like that to be answered by a specific person, then please do obviously direct that to that person as well. Otherwise, I will choose someone at random. So as I mentioned, this has been kind of one of our most popular topics that we talked about in terms of webinars. And I think the reason for that is that we've seen so much change when it comes to the world of work over 2021, 2020 and 2022. Like, it's been 3 years of pretty turbulent environments, but also a lot of really positive change. And I think for a lot of companies, particularly when it's come to talent acquisition and also leadership of companies, there's been a lot to navigate through. You know, we've gone from office being the norm and the status quo through to fully remote suddenly being forced on everybody, all the way through to the dust kind of settling and this, I suppose, new normal emerging when it comes to work. And in 2022, what we've seen happen is that fully remote has fallen out of favour a little bit, and it started to move more towards the idea of remote first, so the choice of an office, or flexible hybrid, so not being forced in, but having that choice to go in weekly. That's definitely what we've seen in terms of data at Flexa. And to put that into numbers, the demand for fully remote in terms of searches that happen monthly have literally halved over the last 3 months, and remote first has more than doubled. I would love to get our experts' opinion on whether you think that is the case. Is this a short-term blip, or is the choice of an office rather than necessarily being fully remote something that will be here to stay in 2023? Gillian, I saw you kind of nodding along there, so I'll come to you first.
Yeah, no, we're finding that with a lot of candidates. They're asking us, is there an office? And generationally, much sort of younger employees, you know, sort of out of college first, they want an office experience and they want to go into the office. That is our experience of candidates. They're asking if the office is there. They still want a level of flexibility, of course, but they do want to know that there's an office and that people go to the office from time to time. So there's lots of questions about that. And that's shifted, I would say, over the past 4 to 5 months. And yeah, I even I'm nearly, you know, sort of moving away even from the terminology of hybrid and remote. I nearly want to remove those words now and just say that it's flexibility and flexible working, and it looks different for everybody. And I think that organizations need to be flexible. But I do think you still need an office, a branded office that, you know, people can come to, and I think people would like that and know that that's there for them, you know. So that's what we're seeing, and that's what candidates are saying to us.
Yeah. And Chris, I'd love to hear about Mars's approach and what you think about that in respect to the office. And is it here to stay?
Yeah, so I definitely agree with Gillian. I think the mix of the office and having the opportunity to go in is really important. So at Mars, we have a unique problem in that we have half of our workforce that are office based and half of our workforce that need to be in and producing our products. But it's about having an environment that really fosters collaboration, connection, and the flexibility in the office too. So I think doing away with you need to be in the office 9 to 5, you need to be kind of at your desk the entire time. So if I think about personally, the level of kind of productivity in the office for me has probably gone down in terms of kind of core traditional, I'd say, kind of hand and pen work, but it's hand on keyboard work. But what I get from that is the chance to collaborate and really solve some of those problems that would take days over Teams. So I think it's really important to have that there, but it's about flexibility in the sense that you're not forcing people to go in. It has to work for them as well as it has to work for you. So for Mars, it's the approach really is kind of a three-pronged one. Does it work for the customer? Does it work for the team? And does it work for you? And that's the way we approach it with everything. It's not a one-size-fits-all fit for us.
I think that's a brilliant approach, and it is why Mars is verified by Flexa as well, and super flexible, and scored brilliantly through that process. And from one flexified company to another, let's go to Louis at Flipdish. I'd love to hear your thoughts about remote first and the returning desire for the office.
Yeah, I think if we was having this conversation 12 months ago, like it would have just been everything would have been focused on being flexible. Like absolutely everything would have been focused on remote first, really driving that. But I was reading the Forbes magazine for their predictions for 2023 in terms of workforce, and flexibility actually was below workforce and culture in terms of candidate demand. So I think just being flexible probably isn't enough anymore, and having that culture in the office or virtually, whichever way you do it, is going to be as important as offering flexibility, because I think there's been a change or a switch or a movement, whatever you want to call it, that actual culture is now overtaking the ability to just work from home, because I feel like some people began to feel isolated, in that sort of movement. So combining the two and not having a standardized approach is, and when I mean standardized, I don't mean as a company, I mean employee individuality. So every single person can have that opportunity.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm allowed to come in there, but just when you said culture, it totally, because I think everyone is kind of looking on as well with what's happening in the market at the moment. And I think they want to know that the culture of the organization is real. I think people are going to become very fussy, like the quiet quitting for me is all about people like just holding back and seeing, am I giving my time to this company? So I think culture is really, really going to be, as you said, probably number one, then flexibility is either 2 or 3. but people want to make sure the culture is real. They're not going to commit and sign up until they really do the sense check to check that you are what you say on the tin.
I think culture and flexibility very much go hand in hand as well. I don't think you can really have one without the other. And I think that, flexibility back pre-pandemic, it was very much like written at the bottom of a job description, flexible working. It's like, well, what does that really mean? And I think people are understanding more and more that it does mean location and hours and benefits, but it also means trust and autonomy. It means work-life balance. It means senior leadership role modeling. There are so many other things that go into that really mean that it's a genuine culture and it's a flexible and autonomous culture. So with that in mind, I think it's a really interesting question to ask is like, how can companies adapt that? Like, how can you showcase your culture in a world where all kind of next career steps and job hunting is done online? Like it's pretty difficult to understand. Chris, obviously that's your forte with employer brand and recruitment marketing. So how would you recommend companies really showcase their cultures?
I think it's about kind of scaling back. And number one is understanding what your EVP is, so what your employer value proposition is, what is unique about your company, and is that, so at Mars, that's the 5 principles for us, and it's a set of 5 principles that we genuinely live by. So it's about breaking that down and then really trying to engage that in a story. So for us, that looks like not sharing any imagery that is not an associate at Mars. Every single quote that we share is a genuine associate at Mars, and there's quite often a good with a bad as well. You won't catch us talking about flexibility and saying everything's perfect at Mars, because that's disingenuous, and I think everyone can read straight through that as well. In the point of kind of how to do that in a digital world where we lack that connection, I think that is a problem, particularly that we've had for our early careers. So really showcasing a Mars culture across graduate populations in the last 2 years has been so difficult because we've not been able to get there. So I'd say it's a mix. It's about using digital when you need to use that to target the right talent, to really appear in front of the right people and share that message, but have that as a supporting moment, but then also use those moments where you can, and it's another use of the office, isn't it? So use those points to create candidate touch points where they can meet people and they can make their own decision about your culture. It's about really giving those that talent that possible way of really connecting with you and with your brand ultimately.
Definitely agree with that. And Louis, I think you'll have some interesting insights as well, because I think Flipdish does this really well in terms of like the video, they're making it feel like you do a lot of video stuff, you make it feel very real online, particularly on LinkedIn. I'd love your advice to other companies on how to do the same.
Yeah, so that's kind of like one of our values. Like one of our values is all around sort of like honesty and respect. And obviously Chris has touched on it from like an employer brand perspective, which at Flipdish we're exactly the same. So like all of our videos are our employees. The meet the team are our team. You know, all of the images of the restaurants, they're going to be our customers. You know, they're actual Flipdish customers. And I feel that you can do a lot with employer brand, which Chris has touched on, but then that also filters into the interview process as well, in the sense that that is the first time you can really install what your culture's like. And I feel like one thing that we do really well, in my opinion, is just pure honesty during interviews. And we've had it a lot whereby, you know, like it's been tough times for companies, you know, over the last 12 months, and it's probably going to be some tough times as well. And we've had a lot of comments throughout our interview process around, you know, just how honest people are throughout that process and the people that they meet, and sort of really getting an understanding of, you know, we're not trying to sell for sell's sake on Flipdish, but really just trying to show the vision and the picture of what we're trying to build here, and just giving people the opportunity to work out whether that aligns with their values as well. So I feel like creating an interview process with lots of touch points, giving the opportunity for, again, candidates to come into our office. All of our interviews are virtual, but we always offer the opportunity to meet the team in person as well. And often we have interviews in this office that I'm sat in, you know, where people are like, look, I'm based local. Have you got are any of these interviewers based local? And then we'll get people in the office to meet.
Yeah.
I think that's also where platforms like Flexa come in really well, because you have that genuine, this is not something we've just gone and said, it's something our associates, our employees have actually said about us.
Yep.
I think that's really important as well, is being open with everything and saying, look, we're not going to try and sell to you here. This is the genuine 100% truth in what you get. And we're going to step back and let action do the talking ultimately.
Absolutely. Creating those employee stories, letting your employees' voices come through, I think is probably the most important thing to do, because people care about other people. They care about stories. That's what they relate to. And I think, to your point as well, Chris, like making sure it's credible and authentic, like you saying, oh, we're a great place to work, like that's less believable than like our employees say we're a great place.
I've inherently got a reason to say that. Like you know, as an employer brand manager, I'm not going to sit there and go, oh, it's horrible to work here. And I think people know that. So every time they see something, so I try not to use myself in any content because of that exact reason. They see my job title and go, oh, trying to sell to us. So just, you kind of give it to someone that what are they gaining out of lying here? I think it's really important.
Yeah, I think we're surrounded by so much social media and so much advertising that the consumer, and whether that's a consumer in terms of a prospective employee or a candidate or job seeker, they can sniff out inauthentic content. So I think it's very wise to lead with the real stuff. Gillian, to come to you, kind of summarize, like, what advice would you give companies on showcasing their culture in a digital world?
Yeah, well, I suppose I come from it from the other angle. So obviously within Workvivo, we have an employee engagement and communication platform where we bring our purpose and our values and culture to life every day. And it's obviously heavily used in Workvivo, as you can imagine. But we then have our employees that are ambassadors for that. You know, they go out naturally and they are promoting, because internally we're doing all the connection, we're doing the community, we're building spaces. And then naturally, organically, they go out and through social media highlight how great it is to work in Workvivo. They share any of the stuff that we have, and we're never asking them to do that. So they're real ambassadors for us. We also ensure that there's lots of people within our business that are out externally, like I'm here today, but there'll be lots of different people that are attending different webinars at different levels within the organization. And they are the showcase of what Workvivo is. You know, they do embody our values and role model. And we'd always get, you know, people come out, oh, met your team, they're so nice, they're so warm. And it brings the culture to life through our people. So
absolutely. I think all of us there kind of summarize
exactly the same thing. Yeah.
I think also, just to kind of build on that as well, I think transparency is so important. Louis, you said you're very honest and open about things. I actually think that's really, really crucial now to hiring, because if we look at how everything has shifted, it used to be that if you're looking for a marketing manager role, you would just apply to every marketing manager role that suited your experience and your salary expectation, if they even showed the salary expectations back then. But now a fully remote marketing manager, a remote first, a hybrid with flexible hours, dog-friendly offices, work from anywhere, they're all completely different roles. And so that transparency and that saying, this is the company that we are, and making sure that you're providing the information for people to make an educated decision about where to work is so important. You don't want to be something to everybody. You want to appeal to the niche of people that are perfect for your company and are an ideal fit. Not necessarily culturally, just in terms of the working environment that you offer and the mission that you have. So I think that's a really important one, is tell your stories through people, but also don't try to appeal to everybody.
I also think, I think that mission is so important, because I think another massive shift that has happened is I think people genuinely care more about what their company does now. You know, like where, like previously, even myself, you know, I worked at employers because I went to the interview and I liked the people there. You know, I didn't really invest into what the company did themselves. Whereas now it's the exact reason I'm at Flipdish. You know, like I was genuinely interested in the hospitality trade. I genuinely cared about the customers we were trying to support, you know, and I think that is a huge shift now. Like, I think that flexibility and remote and all of this is brilliant, but I do think that people care more about the service or the product that their employer is providing. So matching your mission to an employee's mission, only really the employee can make that decision. So you have to be honest about what yours is in order to give them the opportunity to let it match.
Absolutely agree with that. And that's very much a consistent theme that we've seen over the last 6 months. We ran a YouGov survey on like what people look for. And you're completely right. So flexibility of the working environment, assuming salary is fair, of course, like we'll remove that one. Flexibility in working environment is number one, but very, very closely followed by like mission or purpose. And then the third one, interestingly, is progression and the ability to kind of like personal development, I suppose. So they were the top three, and that was consistent across Gen Z, Millennial, and Gen Y as well, which is really interesting. It didn't vary that much by generation. So it's really important for companies, obviously, to adapt to that. The other prediction that I was going to touch on, that I'd be really, really interested to hear your views on, are the 40-hour work week, 5 days a week, kind of lack of flexible hours. The demand for flexible hours we have seen increase by over 25% in the last 12 months. Now, I think there are lots of different reasons for that, but I'm not going to put words in people's mouths. I would be really interested to hear about why you think flexible hours matter, or do they? Does it matter? And what your company is kind of doing to embrace that, and where you think that will go in 2023. It's a 3-part question, sorry. I will come to Gillian first this time. Oh, we've lost Gillian. I will come to Louis then.
No worries, I can take this. So yes, I think that
Great.
flexibility in hours is probably going to replace, I guess, the flexible location in the sense that I don't think people are going to mind coming back into the office, but they'll probably want to have a choice of what time they come into the office. I was in the office on Tuesday in a real world scenario where somebody came in at 10:30, and that person said, I cannot believe how much safer it is cycling in at this time than at 7:30 in the morning. And that's kind of, I think that is going to be the difference, avoiding the rush hour, avoiding them trains and those tubes that we all hated. I came into the office over my lunch break today, for that exact reason. I did not want to get on that 7:30 train again, to try and get in for 9. So I think that we don't actually have a policy. Apart from contractually, we don't have a policy that's enforced at Flipdish. I even asked my manager, I said, what is our policy on 40-hour working week? And he was just like, well, I just trust you. It's just like, I have no idea how many hours a week you do. So I think it's a difficult one because we obviously have global clients at Flipdish. So we have some teams that have set hours. So, we have some teams in customer support or tech support that cover US hours. And so it's difficult to offer flexibility in those cases. But apart from that, I think if you can work flexibly, then the sort of policy should be that you should be able to be trusted to manage your own time. Yeah. I think if you can't be trusted to manage your own time, you're probably need to look at yourself first, from that side of things.
Absolutely agree with that. And I think with flexible hours, it's also very interesting of like we're seeing more and more companies move away from just presenteeism and monitoring people by how long they're sitting at their desks and more towards that output driven culture of like, are you actually performing in your role? Because ultimately it doesn't really matter if somebody's amazing and they're working 25 hours a week. Are you going to sack them?
Yeah.
You'll be like, gosh, you're so good. How have you got everything done? Or you look at it and be like, have they actually been given enough work? So I think it's all about output and it's all about how someone is performing rather than whether or not they're sitting at their desk.
And I think on that point, there's a part there in which there's a point at which the organisation has to turn around and say, is it my judgment here, and have I hired the wrong person if you're unable to get this work done or unable to do some part of that job in that time? Have I hired the wrong person, rather than is it always the employee's fault? I think it comes back to what I think has been a theme in everything we've kind of said. It has to be that mutuality, that kind of two-way street between an organisation and their employee.
Absolutely agree with that. Gillian, you're back.
No, I'm so sorry. I was having a heart attack here. So I'll talk really quickly just in case you lose me again. So yeah, I think the 40-hour week is completely out of date. I think, well, most tech companies do 37.5 anyway. But that said, the amount of studies that are being done on the 4-day week at the moment, and I've had numerous chats with the CEO of 4-day week, Joe O'Connor. I think we will be merging towards that over the next sort of 5 to 10 years. I think, you know, the 5-day week will phase out. I'm predicting, but you know, there's a lot of companies that their productivity stays the same. People are happier. And when I did a survey myself and asked people within organizations, they said there's 40% waste in companies, you know, bad meetings, doing things that don't really matter. So we have a lot of waste in our organizations. And if we can kind of repurpose that and get a little bit more productive, what a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, so I'm a big fan of the 4-day week.
I think that it suits some companies, that flexibility around the hours. Like for us personally, as a scaling organization, the flexibility massively helps. You know, like there are peaks and troughs in terms of busy times for scaling organizations. So just having set hours every single week just doesn't work with how the business runs anyway. You know, so for a scaling organization, having that ability to be like, look, sorry, there's a bit more work this week, we're going for funding or whatever, you know, it's a totally different week to the next week after that. So you have to have that flexibility across the employee workforce.
Yeah, and I think we have to understand, like, people, you know, if I take myself, I have 3 children, I have a home, I run all that, like, you know, if someone gives me a body of work, I'm well able and capable to mind that and do it when it needs to be done. You know, I look after a lot of things. I think sometimes we think we have to put so many things in place and safeguards, but actually empowering people, telling them the work that needs to be done and that they can get it done in that time frame and, you know, have a bit of extra time to themselves. So be it.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
Making the right hire. So you should have those. That should be something done in the interview process of being confident that the person you've hired is able to do the job you've hired them for. And if you've done that, treat them like an adult and go from there. But I definitely agree with Louis. It kind of it depends where a business is at in its journey. It depends what a business does. So again, for Mars, we've got people that, you know, need to be on our production lines producing products. So we need to have kind of rigid working hours there. But if you're in an office, if you're working a global role, you know, there are times when we might need someone to work a little bit later for the US or anything like that. And then I think about flexibility in the sense of there are times like right now, you know, you might be battling a bit of an illness or something like that, about having the flexibility away from the 40-hour working week to go, do you know what? It's right for me today to finish an hour early or 2 hours early. If I'm working, my productivity is going to go nosedive anyway. So it's about having the maturity to recognise that, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And doing what's right for your business as well and your company and your employees. I mean, we chose to do a 4.5-day week because we saw that on Friday afternoon, like, is anyone really doing anything? Like, probably not. And so we say it's a 4.5-day week, unless obviously stuff's mad, like to Louis' point, fundraising, or I don't know, massive onboarding week, loads of clients onboarding. But otherwise, if it's quiet, everybody leaves at lunchtime and you have that extra time in the afternoon. And what's interesting we found is that has really, really enhanced culture because people are still chatting on Slack, but they're out walking their dog or they're at the beach or they're at the pub and people are sending photos and like showing what people do outside of work. So it's actually really, really contributed to our culture, which I think is a lovely thing to be able to see and very much worth the 4-hour sacrifice when people would have probably been sitting watching BBC Sport or patting their dog on the sofa, waiting for work to finish. Like that's ultimately what was probably happening before. We had an interesting comment made here, and I think it's a question that we get asked kind of time and time again. So I'd love, you know, volunteers on who has nailed this, if anyone. How do you measure productivity outside of hours? Like, what is a good performance metric or framework that you found helps to really showcase and like measure people's performance outside of just how long they're actually at their desks and contactable?
I think having a core to Mars, a PDP process is not just about, you know, an end of year rating and it's forgotten. The PDP process is a year-round thing, which is a genuine discussion between you and your line manager. The objectives we set are not just, you know, shared between the teams. They're personal objectives, they're personal development. and we talk openly and frankly about what we want to develop. And so I think having a robust PDP process that isn't just a tick box exercise is a great way of doing it, because I think productivity changes team by team, and will look differently for one team than with another, and for one geography than it does another.
Absolutely agree with that. I think it's interesting. We do a less formal but sounds quite similar process where we have our overarching company KPIs, and each team member has 1 or 2 or 3 that they're working towards that quarter, and we're catching up every week with some people every month on like the progress towards that and the projects that can lead us there. And if that target is exceeded or isn't, then we understand why, and that's a much easier way to benchmark performance and targets rather than, well, you worked really late last night, so you must be working hard, when actually they're not doing anything. Louis or Gillian, do you have any words of wisdom on performance measurement?
Yeah, we don't tend to have an overly formal, we've OKRs and we have the high level strategic objectives, and then they're cascaded into the teams. But it is more of informal conversations during regular conversations, like quality conversations with employees. And we put a huge amount of effort into training our people managers. I think that is the key when it comes to performance management. I don't even really like the term performance management, but we put a huge amount of effort and training and development into our managers to ensure that they can motivate and engage and deal with people and keep them motivated in the job and bring the purpose to life for them. And I think that's where, if you get your people managers right and trained up really well, that really helps with translating, the strategic objectives and actually delivering on them. So that's where we put a lot of time and effort, rather than, I've found in the past, for many years, I've obviously built lots of different performance management frameworks and built them in systems. And over a period of time, people just constantly say to me, oh God, is it that time of the year again? And nobody seems to like having it done to them. Nobody seems to want to do it. And they're constantly trying to tweak it. Whereas we really just want to focus on having good quality relationships with the employees, that they can, receive and give good quality feedback. And we tend to feed forward rather than feedback. So telling them the behavior we'd like to see, and we're very behavior orientated. So talking about the behaviors that we'd like to see demonstrated.
Yeah, and that's really useful. Also, those like annual reviews can create so much anxiety for people as well. If that conversation hasn't been ongoing and you don't know, and then all of a sudden it's the end of the year, I think
I think the key metric is the level of trust between the employee and their manager. So that probably goes back to Gillian's point about making sure that training is there, in the sense that you have such an open, trusting culture that people are able to turn to you and say, like, this week I cannot deliver that because this is what's happening, like outside of work. And I feel like that is part of the problem, because something that looks very, very achievable one month is not achievable another month, purely based on personal situation. So, having that ability, it's all well and good having OKRs and personal development plans, which we do have. But that ability to be able to be confident and turn to your manager and be like, look, I appreciate that looks very deliverable, but at the moment, this is what's going on. So we need to realign and just be fair and honest in terms of what I can achieve this month. And then sort of, constantly evaluating that. That's not something that you schedule in. That's just a constant evaluation as a cultural piece.
Yep, definitely agree with that. Awesome. That was really useful. So before we turn to questions, I'd like to go around the room and ask, what, if you have one, putting people on the spot now, what prediction do you have for 2023 in terms of what employees and candidates are looking for? And if you have any advice to companies in the way of kind of adapting to that. I'm happy to go first because I've actually prepared it. And I think what we've seen at Flexa, and I think it kind of is a culmination of a lot of what we've talked about, but I would summarize it in prediction for 2023 being around choice. So I think what candidates will expect is a package of flexibility, benefits, career progression, that all centers around freedom and the ability to choose within a framework. So like we talked about, that office, being remote first. If there is the choice of an office, if someone feels like coming in 5 times that month, then they can do that, or just once the following month. And the expectation of the business is that they've set a minimum expectation and you meet that and you can choose around that. Same with hours. one day you might feel really alive and awake in the morning and you want to start early and finish early. The next week you might be feeling a bit more sluggish and tired, and you can move that without feeling guilty or feeling like you have to explain those changes. And the same with benefits. I think moving more to that kind of pick and mix of like, well, I really value private healthcare and I really value a work from anywhere scheme, and I want to be able to pick those different things rather than everyone having a gym membership and everyone having 10% off Starbucks. Is that choice, I think, that is going to become so important to people, and companies showcasing the framework within, well, the framework of what people can choose is going to be really important. And that's how companies can adapt to that, is saying, these are the choices that we're giving our employees. This is the minimum that we expect from people. Come join us if that's what you want. So I think that is going to be the biggest one. And then somebody said, as well as 2023, what's the 2030 prediction? I think in 2030, my biggest one will be that people will work more portfolio careers. They'll be really, really good at one thing, and then they'll do that in one business for 3 months, go do it in another business for 6, come back to another business for 3, and it'll be more like moving around will become normal.
Yeah, I wonder, will work become more transactional? Like, we will see it as transactional. So as employers, we're trying to engage, but I wonder, will it by 2030, but be exactly as you said, you know, you take on a piece of work from various companies, you do it, and you have more freedom. And then for the organizations, I suppose the win-win is they don't have all the other things that go with. But I don't know. I think I'm predicting it, but I don't know if I'd like it myself. I do like that connection with something and being part of a team that is dry. Like, so for me, it goes against my natural instinct.
Yeah.
But I do see parts of it, and I see it particularly for women. At a certain point, they are dropping out of the workforce in a certain age group, and choosing that to do some consultancy work with various businesses, just so they have more flexibility and freedom at a later stage in life when their kids are a little bit older. I do some coaching, and that trend, I'm seeing it a lot, you know.
And what would your 2023 prediction be?
Yeah, I think, look, I really do see a shift in employees, that I think the things that are happening in the market now, they're looking on at leadership and how people are behaving. They're looking at how organizations have treated people through this. So I think employees, it's going to take longer for them to commit to you. And they're going to do real research, and they're going to probably look into the leadership and the shape of the board, and they're going to look into your purpose, and they're really going to do their homework before they actually commit. Because things have been a lot of noise in the market recently, and people kind of looking on going, no, that's not cool and that's not right. So I think they're going to be fussier with who they align with. So what I would say is that organizations need to be very clear on their purpose and their values and live them. And I think they need to have, you know, proper leadership in place that role model correctly, because people will be more intolerant of accepting, you know, inappropriate behaviors and all that type of thing. So I think they will be fussier. I think, yes, you have to give choice. I think we should have had that a long time ago anyway. People to, you know, they're adults, we're employing adults, so they should have choice, and there should be a proper relationship in place, an adult relationship between the organization and the person. And then mental health. I think more so health than illness. I'm not talking about illness. I think that people will be looking that their organization has a healthy environment and culture, that their mental health can flourish. I think some organizations don't have that in place at the moment. But people will be demanding that they're placed in an environment that is good for their mental health. Yeah. And I'm not talking about illness, I'm talking about health of their building their resilience, and that there's a focus on that.
You read my mind on that one. I made some predictions last week, and I was like, there'll be much more of a holistic approach to wellness rather than just illness. Chris, what is your 2023 prediction, and then have a stab at a 2030 futuristic one?
I think really interestingly, I was kind of jotting down, and I'm kind of glad, although the 2031 hit me, because I was like, it was more through Christ, it's nearly 2030, more than anything, but it comes off the back of that kind of wellness one, and I think it's moving away from, so the 2023 prediction is moving away from enabling your employees to survive to enabling them to thrive.
Yeah.
And then longer term, that looks like this almost broken relationship we have with work, where work is something we do we live to work, but I think we'll move towards people really realizing that actually we work to live. Let's get that the right way around before I kind of
I
really
know what you
went
mean,
on with it. So it's moving into, like, again, choice. What works for me? You know, is it flexibility? Is it I condense my hours, whatever it may be, moving into healthcare, moving into mental health support. And I think all of that then, as we look to a big, I don't like using the word trend for this, but it's the only word that really covers it, but diversity and inclusion as well. And I think that's the only way we can hire truly diverse organizations, is realizing that it's a two-way street. We don't work for an organization, we work with an organization. And I think around, looking at particularly around gender parity in the workplace, that's a huge way to do that, because we know there are different needs for different people, and that's the only way of really equaling and leveling the playing field, is by saying, you pick what works for you, you pick what works for you, and you pick what works for you. A little bit more passionate about that than I thought I was going to be. So
rousing. I enjoyed that. Louis, what is your 2023 prediction? And then have a stab at 2020. That's fine.
Yeah, so I think if I take this from like a brand perspective, and then also sort of like a recognition perspective, I think people want, however you want to put it, more off the cuff recognition. So, having quarterly meetings with your managers, they have to go, it has to be that continuous. And what I mean by that is giving managers the ability to feel comfortable making almost flexible decisions outside of company policy. So i.e. a manager can turn to their team and just be like, look, we've worked so hard this week, everybody, have a thank you Friday. Or like having that ability to really enforce that flexibility. It's something that we do really well here at Flipdish, is just off the cuff days off. The whole company was shut last Friday for a thank you Friday, just because workload was high a few months ago. We had summer Fridays whereby we had every other Friday off over summer. That was pretty much off the cuff as well. So, and those little things mean so much to people. So continuing that and giving and empowering the managers to have that is absolutely crucial. I guess my second point for 2023 goes back to the attraction piece, is similar to, I think that people are going to care more about the product. Now, I mentioned it earlier. And what that means is that I think companies need to be far more bigger on their socials, far more focused on their socials. I read somewhere, make sure I get this right, that 73% of like 18 to 34-year-olds got their last job through social media, not through a job board. So, at Flipdish, our Instagram and our TikTok is very customer centric. Like, it's very much focused on our customers, and we will have to include an element of life at Flipdish into our socials in order for people to make that decision as to give a real view on that. So I think from a brand perspective, next year socials is going to be huge, absolutely massive, and not just LinkedIn. Like LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, all of these platforms that are coming through will be a big focus for us. 2030, that's a hard one. And the reason I think it's hard is because I look at my own journey, and I remember being sat in an office 4 years ago saying I'd never worked a day from home ever, and thinking, why would anyone want to do that? So I think for me is people are going to look at employees that are who are agile employers, who are prepared to make change quickly and can adapt, because I think it's impossible. Like when you look at what's happened, like you say, like 2019 to 2020 to 2021 to 2 to 3, they're just impossible to predict on a 12-month basis, let alone trying to predict what's going to happen on sort of like an 8-year, or 7-year basis. So I think when you look at an employer and you think, okay, how have you changed? Like this could be something that you ask in an interview, like how have you changed to accommodate over the last 12 months? Will at least give you a bit of an idea as to, can they change? Can that employer adapt? Can they do this? And then you'll be able to paint a picture in your head as to, okay, if I am still here, 2027, 28, 29, 30, will I have the ability to work in an organization that can prove that they can adapt to a world that is always changing?
Absolutely agree with that. I really agree with the social side of things. It's been fascinating for us because obviously we do so much employer brand stuff with our companies, and to see the huge increase in engagement across all the social channels that we do that with, like LinkedIn, TikTok, even Instagram and Facebook, which are reportedly dying, but there's still massive engagement on them because people want to the point that was made earlier, do as much research as possible before joining a company. And
Instagram this week, I don't know if you see, they just stuck a location tab that means that you can put remote as a location. So you can now advertise jobs and put them as remote as the location. And it's one of the reasons that they did it. So I like TikTok's not going to be far behind that. You know, as soon as they see that Instagram's done that, that will be something that they will start to do as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Well, we've got quite a few questions lined up. Before we go to questions, I just wanted to point out, because we've talked through so many different themes and so many, you know, all of these predictions for 2023. Just wanted to point out the little pinned comment that is up in the top right, the purple thing where it says view message. If you do want to actually benchmark your work environment against the market and all of these kind of changing predictions and what candidates really want, then we've built this literally like 2-minute little benchmarking quiz that will help you to actually get actionable insights around like where you're really competitive, where you aren't, where there's some opportunity, and whether you're matching up to candidate demands. So hopefully that's an easy way to get some very interesting and actionable insights based on what we've kind of spoken about. But without further ado, let's move to questions. Got lots of people wanting to know about Mars. You're going to be just answering all the questions now, Chris. So Karen wondering, has it been hard for Mars to incorporate flexible working because you're such a big company? And what advice would you give to other very large companies who are hesitant about it?
So I think there's two parts to that question. One is partly yes, because inherently our organisation is very, very split. So, you know, we have the supply side of our organisation, which is, you know, 24/7 factories that need to produce our products. We have, Mars is the world's largest veterinary services provider as well. So we have veterinary hospitals, which again come with a whole host of other challenges there as well. And then we've got 34 to 40,000 office-based associates. So there is no one size fits all policy to it. I think for Mars, it was really, it comes down to our culture and our purpose. And so for me, and our EVPs, our employer value proposition, is people purpose development. So people and purpose are at the core of everything we do. And the purpose side of that encompasses kind of three different things. So one of those is what we call the associate concept, and that is that we're not employees. So it comes back to my point of we work together. So I don't say I work, I probably do just through habit, but I work for Mars. I say I kind of work with Mars, and that's a two-way street. So it has to be fair. There has to be mutuality, which is one of our 5 principles again. So we're a family-owned business, and the Mars family have the 5 principles that I think for me are more than just something that's written on the back wall at an office as a quote. They are something we inherently live, and we make our decisions by those, and those are quality, freedom, mutuality, responsibility, and my brain's gone. This is a really bad time to forget the 5th. Hope there's no senior leaders watching, but and I think mutuality is the key one there. Quality, I didn't say, is the key one there. But there's also the responsibility side of that. So as an organisation, we want to remain responsible. You've got our purpose, so the world we want tomorrow starts with how we do business today, and that all of those inherently look together. And so as what we did is we listened to our people. It wasn't just a case of we think this is what should be done and therefore we'll just go and do it. But the flip side of that, which I think would be my advice for larger companies, is don't be afraid to say no as well. There are a lot of parts in there where if you listen to everyone, you know, we've got 140,000 associates worldwide. So if we listen to every single one of them, there'd be this really slapdash set of policies which make no sense. So what we did is listen to them, really build that into this is what we're hearing, and then ran that through that kind of model of, does it work for our customer, does it work for your team, and does it work for you?
Yep.
And if the answer was no to any of them, it wasn't, you know, anything we did. So that would be my slightly long-winded advice. But I would definitely encourage doing it. I think as an associate, I can speak that, you know, that is one of the reasons that I stay at Mars, quite frankly.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. Great advice. Gillian, I'm going to ask you a question now. So Rowena is wondering, how do you figure out what way of working or flexibility suits your company? Is it just trial and error, or are there any other methods that you have used?
Yeah, I think I don't think there's one solution. And during COVID and during some of those times when I saw large organizations going with a position, I don't think you can have a position. I think everything, that's why it's very complex. Like, people are complex. And even you're dealing with people issues. I've been a CPO for numerous years working in HR. Nothing is ever black and white when it comes to people. And I think we really, really want to have something that you can say, here's the framework, this is what we do. But as soon as you do that framework, someone's going to come in that doesn't fit that framework, and it's going to, you know, cause it to be null and void. I was on a webinar yesterday, and I was speaking to a guy who's head of remote, and then another lady who's based in Dubai, and she's head of remote for an organization. But even though they're head of remote, they still said there's people that are working in India that, you know, are in families where they have lots of people, you know, living in their home. And it's very important for them to get to the office, and very important for them to get out of their home. Not everyone has a home like you may have or I may have. So one size is not going to fit all. We say it all the time with HR, but then we still try and have these one policies or these one framework for all these different people. So it's complex, and yes, it does take time, but it's the right way to do it, because any other way, it's just not going to work. People are complex, and we try to address people issues in the same way that we would with a task. So my advice is, yes, it is trial and error. And the best thing, I think as well, in my experience, is go to the team, go to the actual team to try and sort these type of things out, because you'll come down with, you know, the framework, or try and say, you know, give them guidelines, but let them sort it out. And 9 times out of 10, they'll come back with the best option that you would never have thought of. So empower them to come up with how they work and what they do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I hope that helps.
Love that. Louis, so I'm going to come to you because I know that Flipdish, I hope I've got this right, has offices in Dublin, London, New York, and Paris.
Yeah.
So,
we have one in Germany and Spain as well, I believe. So
there we go, Germany and Spain as well. Right. So even better place to answer this question. Do you find that candidate expectations vary significantly by geography?
in terms of flexibility.
It is a very broad question. Just Matthew asks if we find that candidate expectations vary significantly by geography. I'd assume, based on what we're speaking about, yes.
Yeah, so I think globally that people want an office to go into. I think that is a global movement. I don't think that is just a London thing or a UK thing. I think that one thing that is going to happen is that we will probably move to more of a hub model rather than an office model. So, for example, in Ireland, I know that they have like the digital connected hubs, which is sort of like it's actually done as a national scheme whereby there are remote offices in remote communities that people can go to. And I think that will very much be the future. So, for example, in the UK, we only have one office in Flipdish. That's where I am. It's in central London. It's brilliant for about half of the UK population, half of the UK workforce. But I think selectively, what will happen going forward is that you will then have hubs in certain places that you rent out for a day a month for other people to come and connect. So you would rent out an office space in Manchester for a couple of days and allow employees from that area of that area of the world to go in and connect. So I think that is something that will become more and more and more, is that sort of hub model rather than a centralized office. Because at Flipdish, it's brilliant that we have a London office, but we have employees in Scotland and Manchester and Newcastle that can't utilize that. So I feel hubs will definitely be something that will happen more and more. I know that it happens in Ireland, whereby some of our teams go to these rural hubs, and you mention it to other employees, not even in their team, who are in that area, and then they'll go there, have lunch, have that office culture, and sort of improve. So I think that is something that will globally become more apparent.
Yeah. And I guess that then a nice segue into a question from Ben here of where do we see the future heading for company activities and socializing? Because obviously if people are in sporadically, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's crucial, right? I think that it's something that we are big on here. You know, realistically, our customers are the food and drinks industry, so like we're typically people that like eating out and going for a drink. So you know, we try to do as much as possible here at Flipdish. We sort of empower country managers to have a budget to spend on socials once a month. So we do all sorts of things here. And it comes down to that piece of encouraging people to come in, but not asking or forcing them to come in. Yep. So on a Tuesday, for example, we order lunch from one of our customers, and people who are in the office get that lunch. You know, like they get that free lunch. So that's just one incentive that we do. We want, like I say, like once a month, I'm part of the London office social committee. We'll do something really random. You know, like we've been to office quizzes. We've painted things in that office over there. So that wall's full of paintings of employees that have come in. Yep. So I think that you have to encourage team meetups. So even for me personally, I'm the only person in my team in the UK. The rest of my team, none of them are based in the UK. Yep. So I have to visit my team. I fly out to Ireland, I go and see my team, and that is a huge part of what we do, and that will definitely not stop. If anything, I think that will increase, and it's something that we're putting more of an emphasis on, is getting people in front of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And Gillian, what do you do at Workvivo for kind of socializing and bringing everyone together?
Yeah, so like recently we just had, you know, a coffee morning, so we all did some baking and got people in. Unbelievable the amount of people that actually made it back into the office. And what we've seen then is a kind of a big increase in people coming back in. They kind of, not that they forgot, but when you do these events, then people come back in again for the social interaction. We obviously have regular events. We do brunches on Thursdays. We do, you know, drinks. And we're actually researching, and we're going to all go and donate blood before Christmas, just to do something nice together to give back, because there's actually a shortage in Ireland. So we're constantly coming up with little things, and, you know, not all going out to the pub related. You know, try and change it up, that it's coffee mornings, it's baking where people can showcase their talents as well. Doing, you know, sort of a bit to give back to the community. And there's always, directly after we do that, then we see more people coming back in, because you do kind of forget. I mean, when I was at home a lot during COVID, and I went into the office kind of for the first time, my husband even said, God, you know, you look different. And it's because I'm extroverted. And I, you know, I wouldn't have said that, you know, I was particularly missing people, but when I got back in around people, you could see the difference in me. I was much more, so we can sometimes forget how much we need people, and all it takes is to go in and do those things. And then you're like, oh God, yeah, I forgot. That's lovely. I love those. I love going down for a coffee with someone or having the chats. And
more effort's going into it, I think, because it's becoming less common. Like, you're not in the office Monday through Friday now, so it can't just be random. Like, you have to actually think about it and plan it.
Yeah.
Molly, I know that you like this as well. So I think having a dog-friendly office is normally is an incentive in itself. You know? So as soon as I bring my dog into the office, there are normally a few people that follow the fact that there is a dog just in the office.
And 20% of people are searching for dog-friendly offices, so that's a huge perk, and it does bring people in.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, 20% of people. Really amazing. It's one of our most popular benefits of the search for Flexa. We have now run out of time, but Ian has raised a very existential question, which I think is a perfect summary of the discussion that we've had today. So I'd like to finish on that. And Ian said, given that we don't know what an office is, or a manager does, or how to measure productivity clearly anymore, what do you think the process through which we will all work out what we really want? And I think the best way to summarize it is that out of uncertainty comes innovation. And I think we just need to be keeping an eye on the companies that are leading that innovation, creating working environments that attract the best talent. They'll be the ones that win in terms of productivity, in terms of employee engagement, in terms of the ability to hire and ability to retain. And the companies that aren't doing that will realize pretty quickly, because they'll start losing talent and not being able to hire it again. I think it's going to be a natural evolution of a very new way of working. And although that might feel uncomfortable, it's something to be quite excited about, because I think ultimately we'll end up in a better place than we were 5 years ago.
Well said.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much to everybody listening, and thank you very much as well to our fantastic panelists. We will be following up to listeners with just an email with everyone's details and the companies that they work for as well, and just different interesting links about what we've discussed too. So yeah, hope you have a lovely Thursday evening. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.